Hi, Ashkanda here, and today I would like to talk with you about the Creativity Incorporated, the book by Ed Catmull. Okay, so Ed Catmull is one of the founders of a famous animation studio called Pixar. You all already probably heard this name before because Pixar is really worldwide famous for their masterpieces from the world of animation. And I think at some point of a time it started to be considered even higher than Disney, for example. Even though Disney is still a hegemon in the whole world of animation. The whole book is pretty much a long tale told by Ed, who is one of the founders of Pixar. Pretty much went all the way from the very beginning of how he came into the industry and how Pixar became the company that we all know and which creations we all love with all our hearts. So it all starts from him learning computer sciences back in the days. I think it was the end of 70s when he graduated, and then he of course found people with similar views, so they kind of started to work, I think, at Lucasfilms back in the days, and they were mainly in charge of the special effects. And like Lucasfilms, LucasArts is the company made by George Lucas, and I think they've been really either one of the first or at least one of the greatest and biggest companies in terms of the production of those special effects. So they were really used in a lot of films back in the days, or at least like in the films that were produced by by George Lucas's company. So they've created a special technology that was really innovative for that time, and something that they were trying to propose to start using as their own product to other companies. And unfortunately, not everybody were believing in them, so they've been trying to collaborate with Disney on this. Nothing really worked out from the first time they tried to collaborate, so at some point of a time, Lucasfilms wasn't having the best times, and they were considering just selling the whole department of this computer technologies thing because it didn't really work out at that point of a time. That is why they were really looking for a lot of investors from different other companies, also mainly from the tech world, and they managed to land the investment from Steve Jobs, who I think you may already heard before, became a sort of an owner of Pixar at some point of a time in his life. Around the same time, there were being more collaborations from the people from Disney, and one of the first, or even the first short animation film that was made was Lux Jr., I think. The one that was shown, and everybody's mind was blown away just because it was something that people never seen before. And all the animation before wasn't the 3D animation, it was a 2D animation, so everybody were just drawing things around, and that was something as spectacular as nobody expected. But still, it wasn't yet the great start for the Pixar. So of course, Steve Jobs being also mainly the tech guy, and you may have heard of the guy because he created Apple, and after he was sort of knocked out from the company, he opened a company called Next Computers. So of course he was mainly interested in the technology itself. So he bought out the rights from Lucasfilms, from one of the companies of George Lucas, for pretty much the Pixar, something that became in the end Pixar company. And pretty much he was really interested in the patents. This is why he also, of course, purchased those. Because the idea was the initial idea for the short film that was shown to the public is that it will be a nice promo way to show how the technology works, so they really would be able to sell the hardware that they would build for animators to use it in their lives. So it was really B2B business at that point in time, as that's how they wanted to see it. As the story goes, they started to collaborate on the Toy Story with Disney, which then was distributed, and then of course Steve Jobs was super skeptical about it, and he was considering selling Pixar to some other people. But then after learning that probably even Disney is really believing in the film itself, and that it will become a hit, he decided to stick around. And yes, indeed, Toy Story was the first full-length animation movie that Pixar ever made. That is why it was really a milestone for the company to achieve that. And then, of course, signed a deal with Disney for 3 films, which was first a bit complicated because they planned to do a sequel after such a great success, but they also had some legal promises. Disney didn't really want to include it in the deal, so they had some debacles around that. Still, at the end of the day, Pixar managed to produce a lot of beautiful movies, and now is really known for the high quality and standard of their creations. So really the bigger part of the whole book was really just the description of the experiences by Ed Catmull, who pretty much was the CEO, or is still the CEO of Pixar, and also after the Pixar got acquired by Disney, he also became kind of a main man in Disney animation department because they were first trying to compete between each other, but after the acquisition they worked together on different things. And especially this book really tells the story about Pixar, and it really tells the story about management of creative people. So it's not necessarily will open you up some revelations about the creative process and how you should make things, how you should write the plot, but rather it tells a lot of stories about like what were some problems and issues with the creation and production of certain films, when there was some principles that Ed Catmull and the other main people in the Pixar introduced, which was, for example, they had their sort of board of creators where they would just always brainstorm about different ideas, and then they just were all working together. So they'd be having like a huge meeting where everybody will be able to like voice their opinion. They will also, of course, when they, at least that's how it was described in the book, is that everybody in the whole company is free to have their input and is free to express their concerns or whatever, because pretty much Ed Catmull believes that it requires a buy-in from the whole team, and no problems or issues should not be hidden, otherwise it will all be the big mess. So they were even saying that even the cleaning lady should express her opinion, and she needs to be buying into the project that we are working on, even though she sort of pretty much indirectly involved in the whole creation process, of course. I think one of the great lessons that I think I learned in trying to introduce in our company and propose us to do that was that Pixar was regularly checking in on the project itself. So because their projects takes up to several years to create, they of course have different stages of the process. So in order to ensure the quality of the process and ensure that the issues will be caught early on, they are pretty much doing those regular postmortems. So like the postmortem is something that would be like a report after the end of the project and how it went well, what went wrong, what could be improved. Because, you know, usually we would focus our attention to the bad things, and if something bad happened, we would of course first think of how to exclude it from the future. But then of course the important stress they're trying to put out and underline is that for all the good things you should also acknowledge them and make sure you will have them in the future moving forward. So like the things that worked just need to be there as well. So besides this very last report, they will of course also have the preliminary reports, like some intermediate reports, if you call it this way, where they will also be seeing, okay, so we're at this stage, what's going well, what is going wrong, is there anything we can change right now? It's just because it's clear that in the film industry and animation industry it's much more important, because we're talking about the millions being spent on the production of each single project. That is why it's really important not to blow everything off just because the risk is so high. The reward is also quite high, but the risk is even higher. That is why everybody needs to be mindful and woke about how they spend their time, and if there are any issues, everybody needs to voice them timely. Overall, if I would just try to summarize the whole book, it's a pretty nice and interesting book for those who are especially interested in more of a creative process and how the management of creative people usually working. I think there were a bunch of anecdotes, quite funny anecdotes from the Pixar life and how they were producing the Toy Story, or how they've been producing some other films that I think 1 or 2 didn't even see the light just because of those fuck-ups that happened. And so it was kind of told in a quite entertaining way, and it's not necessarily like the textbook that would really have this dry language expressing you the management techniques and how you should do this or that. So it was like you were reading a long interview from Ed Catmull on all the things that he made, and maybe it could be, of course, rather kept short, but I think it's really entertaining to just read about the whole story of this such a great company as Pixar and how they are. Of course, they're being quite promotional here, and what would you expect from the insider to tell about the company? But I think they really indeed proven to the outsiders as well that their company is being successful, and he's just describing what are the quite simple rules that they're adhering to in order to be in this level. Thank you very much for listening, and subscribe to the channel, give a like, comment of course, and I'll see you next time.